Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I'm back. Apologies for the delay between videos, but unfortunately COVID got me. It did. And before everyone asks in the comments, as I got on Twitter, yes, I am double jabbed. But unfortunately, as we know, that doesn't completely protect you against it, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it stopped me getting it, really, really badly, ending up in hospital or something like that. Had a couple of rough days, and then I thought it was getting better. Then I had another couple of rough days, but ultimately, I'm much better now. Absolutely fine, pretty much now. Other than the fact that I still technically haven't got my sense of smell or taste back. I can kind of taste the odd quite sharp taste, and smell. I can smell the odd little thing. It's really weird. It's a very, very strange thing. Hopefully it comes back soon. But yeah. But no, we all had it in the house pretty much, barring my oldest daughter, who was fantastic and looked after us all. So she did a great job of essentially being a maid, chef, and nurse, all kind of rolled into one. So we're very, very grateful to her. The other three of us all got it. But we're all better now. And funnily enough, I was out of my isolation period. It was about 2 days before the game at Newcastle. So I got a delightful trip up to St James's Park. Very long day. I think I set off at about 9 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. Got back after 1 a.m. Which probably isn't the cleverest thing in the world to do after you've been struggling away with a disease that has swept across the world. Not to say I was infectious, obviously I wasn't. I did all my exact amount of days that you're meant to do and all that. It wasn't infectious, more the fact that I was just absolutely knackered. And you get a little bit breathless afterwards still as well. But to be honest, it was still quite the experience. It was good to get out, and see Tottenham win a match, back-to-back victories. And to be honest, it's looking a little bit more bright again, really, I think is the way to put it for Tottenham right now. Fifth in the table, 4 points off the top. And you look at some of the teams below them that were above them last season, the likes of Man United, Leicester, West Ham. Spurs are kind of currently above them. It's still early days. It's only 8 games in, but 5 wins out of 8 for Nuno Espirito Santo in the Premier League. Obviously, progressed in the Carabao Cup, currently top of the group in the Europa Conference League as well. Yeah, it's it's not as bad as it seems, I think is the way to say it. The football's much better as well. There's some really good football at times at St James's Park as well, especially that third goal. Third goal's lovely. I'm sure you've all seen it, but that's the kind of move we like to see. And another load of shots on goal. I think it was something like maybe 16, which after the Aston Villa game, it's all heading in the right direction, which is great. Certain players starting to kind of pick up a little bit of form again, which is nice. I should say, I know technically the video I was meant to do was going to be a Q&A, and there were lots of terrific questions. There really were. So what I'm going to try and do is do like a little kind of bonus extra video, as it were, perhaps towards the end of this week, and I'll just answer some of those questions, because a lot of the questions are quite timeless, so it doesn't really matter when they come after a match or not. So I might try and squeeze one of those in this week just to make up for missing it. But yeah, you wouldn't have wanted a video from me. Early last week I was lots of sweat, a lot of weird, sorry for the information, probably too much information, but yeah, for some reason my body was just, obviously because you have a fever and all that sort of stuff, it was flipping from being really hot, sweating everywhere, to being really cold and like shivering. So yeah, you didn't want that in front of you on a screen, trust me. But I will do that. So, the other thing that's quite interesting is that on the I saw on the corresponding fixtures from last season, Tottenham are actually 6 points up. And that's not including the Watford game, because obviously Watford weren't in the Premier League last year. I mean, technically, yes, you could pick one of the promoted teams from last year. It's a bit of a difficult way to compare that. But if you look at the other fixtures, 6 points up, so that's good. That's improvement. That's what we want, and we want that to continue. I just think the biggest thing for me is, I still get people being very unpleasant towards Nuno Espirito Santo. There's this one person who I think they're from Korea. Looking at their bio, I think they're from Korea. Just writes the most horrible messages about Nuno Espirito Santo every day and feels like they have to tag me in them. Calling him disgusting and talking about his disgusting face and the terrible things he's doing to Tottenham Hotspur. And do you know what? I see stuff like that and it just actually makes me kind of root for Nuno even more. Because whatever you make of him, whatever you wanted him or not, what do you think of the way his tactics? What do you think of the way his teams play? Whatever you think of all of those things, I still just feel he's just been dealt such a rubbish hand. And he's dealt, and he's kind of taken it like I don't say a man, that's a really kind of cliched thing, but he's just he's kind of rolled with all the punches. He really has. And he's come in and he's essentially had to be a firefighter at Tottenham. Without even looking at the original stuff when he first came in, like the Kane, the Ndombele stuff, all the sagas with them and wanting to leave and coming in as, being most people's 10th choice, if that anyway, for the job. And all the players coming late back from international duty for the start of the season because of the Euros and the Copa America. Then on top of that, the first international break, that was an absolute chaotic disaster that was nothing to do with him, not his fault at all. And then this time, you're getting towards this one. It looked like, this international break had been quite kind. And then we got the, wind that had been 2 positive COVID tests within the camp. Thankfully, eventually, they were proved to have been false positives. The players did, I think it was the Thursday they got the positive test. Then the Friday they did a negative test. And the Saturday they did a negative test, which essentially meant that they could fly out with the team to play on the Sunday. But obviously, within all of that, your whole preparations and everything has been completely disrupted because you're essentially having to plan to have them if they were in your starting 11 and plan not to have them if they weren't. And it's just chaotic. And then on top, actually, I should just say on the test thing, the positive test or false positive test, I think it was a really good example of how social media can maybe not be at its finest. As journalists, we weren't going to reveal the names at all. Apologies for the throat thing. It's an after effect of having a load of rubbish down my throat because of the COVID stuff. But yeah, as journalists, we weren't going to ever name the players. As journalists, we have a kind of a moral code that, and I think actually in some countries, journalists, there's actually laws that prevent it. It's someone's own private medical information. And if they don't choose to release that, then who are we to tell the world, what's wrong with them or whatever. I had lots of people saying, oh, you can tell me, go on, and all this sort of stuff. And obviously we saw people putting out certain names out across social media and things like that. And I just feel like what happened in the end with the fact that they didn't even have COVID as it was, just shows the danger that we do have on social media of people are feeling the need to have to identify, to have to name, to have to say these things. I even had someone tell me on Twitter, because I said something like that on Twitter. It was a bit, preachy. It wasn't meant to be, but it was essentially saying, this is why we've got to be careful of putting people's medical information out there when it wasn't even the case eventually. And I had someone saying, I deserve to know what is up with these people. I might meet them on the street and shake their hand and then get it. And other than the fact I looked at their bio and they clearly lived in another country anyway, it's like, what are the likelihood of them kind of bumping into these players who are meant to be sticking in a bubble anyway with their teammates? It's just like, yeah, I'm not too fond of that side of social media, as you might be able to tell. But yeah, so obviously Nuno had to deal with all of that. Then on top of that, his right-hand man, Ian Castro, his assistant head coach, in the early hours of Sunday morning ahead of the game, his partner went into labour and had their first child. He became father for the first time, which is obviously fantastic news for him and them. But unfortunately, it meant that on the day of this big game, Nuno suddenly didn't have his right-hand man, his long-time collaborator, the guy, he kind of bounces his ideas off. They sort all the tactics out together. They essentially run the team together. So he had to go to St James's Park, just with his kind of fitness coach and goalkeeping coach, Rui Barbosa, as well. And there's that. And then on top of that, you've also got the fact that Newcastle obviously have got, well, had wind behind their kind of in their sails, as it were, with the takeover stuff, rightly or wrongly, whatever your beliefs on where that money's come from and the rights or wrongs of it. But even that aside, just the kind of the positive upturn it gave, I suppose, the city of Newcastle and the fans and, the noise inside that stadium. For someone who still had a bit of a banging headache after what had happened to me beforehand, it was a terrific atmosphere. But my goodness, it was so loud. It's probably the loudest I've ever heard in a stadium. And I think a lot of that is probably even more so the fact of Mike Ashley going as much as the new people coming in. Whatever we think about Spurs fans and whatever they think of Daniel Levy and all of that and the frustration and disgruntlement, all that, times that by a lot, and you'll get to what Newcastle fans have than Mike Ashley. With all of that, obviously, you saw it. They absolutely, the noise, the passion, it propelled the team to that first probably 2 to 5 minutes. It was just ridiculous. Newcastle were just like, they had, you talk about the 12th man, it was like, there were like another 8 players out there. They were everywhere. They were so pushed on, and obviously Callum Wilson scored that early goal. So Nuno had all of that to deal with, and he came out the other end. He really did. And I feel Nuno spoke a lot about in recent weeks before, during the 3 derby defeats, about how it concerned him about how the team was reacting to adversity. How they were letting themselves really get taken down. 3-0 defeats, conceding 3 goals in 3 defeats. And just the way they were dealing with things going against them was really, there was no character kind of thing. And I think what this shows really is not only that, yes, he has that character. He's taken a lot of punches, a lot of criticism, a lot of hits. But ultimately, you look at it and, he's only... he's won 5 out of the 8 Premier League games, which only 3 other teams have done in the Premier League. It really... I think he's come through it. And the players in the last 2 games have really shown against Villa and against... last 2 Premier League games against Villa and now Newcastle, that they've taken the hits as well and they've come back firing, They dealt really well with it on Sunday. The goal was a sloppy one. It defensively was pretty poor. Emerson and Romero both had a bit of a mare with it. But then what happened was, you obviously have to add the caveat that however much will change at Newcastle with the money that they now have, at this current time, it is still Steve Bruce's very poor, struggling Newcastle side. And I said that to one of the journalists I was there with. It was like, they've scored, but I still don't feel that they are going to be good enough to actually sustain kind of this early momentum. And so it was. But I also, as bad as Newcastle were, I do think Tottenham played their part in making them look bad. Tottenham were very, very good. It was such a shame that silly own goal from Eric Dyer at the end, because it really made a scoreline look far closer than it really was in the match. Spurs managed the game really well. Bearing in mind you had the crowd stuff going on as well, and also a really unfortunate incident with the crowd as well, which we'll come to in one sec. I thought the way they managed that match, there were goals they scored, they could have scored more, they hit the crossbar as well. They really could have. They could have done. Yeah, it could have been a much. It was men against boys, essentially. It's the old cliche, but it was. Let's talk about that very quickly. The incident in Stanley as well, because for me, that's obviously it was more important what was happening to the poor elderly Newcastle fan in the stands, but also as a little byproduct for Tottenham. Again, it was reacting to something that was kind of out of the norm, and they had to deal with it and process it. And actually, they came back from what was a 20-minute or so stoppage, really ready to get back into the match, and they scored, within a couple of minutes of it all kind of restarting. But in that incident itself, if you completely missed it for some reason, suddenly, Sergio Reguilon ran over to the ref, Andre Mariner, and started pointing towards this area of the crowd. And I'll be honest, cynically, I think a lot of us in the press area thought maybe something had been thrown at him or someone had said something perhaps unpleasant towards him that he was making the referee aware of. But obviously what it was an elderly chap had collapsed, and really fortunately for him, there was a doctor, an emergency, I think, someone that worked in A&E, a doctor nearby in one of the seats ran over and started doing CPR on him, and it essentially saved his life. And Reguilon very quickly told the referee. The referee was made aware, came over, spoke to a police officer. The players all came over to the touchline. Eric Dyer ran across to try and get the Newcastle staff to bring over a defibrillator, which, to be fair to Eric Dyer, it looked really dramatic at the time, and he kind of made a point of saying afterwards, we had an interview with him, and he made a case of saying, I actually went over to that member of the medical staff in Newcastle afterwards to apologise because, I didn't want it to look like I was saying that they had to hurry up. And in fact, the reason that they weren't rushing over there was because there was a defibrillator over there where the fan was already. So yeah. But again, quick thinking, really great stuff from both Reguilon and Dyer as well. And I felt so sorry for Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. He came over to the touchline. He was making a sign of his cross on his chest. And, we mustn't forget, obviously, he was there, wasn't he, the European Championships when Christian Eriksen, a similar thing happened as well. And absolutely horrible. But thankfully, all positive news. The players came in, and during that period, medics worked on him. The original doctor obviously kept working as well with him, and the chap was stabilised, taken to hospital, and we're led to believe that quite soon afterwards he was awake and aware and all good as well. So they always say that, don't they? In a weird way, if there's one place you want to collapse in, if you're going to feel unwell, it is a football stadium because of all the facilities, because of all the medical staff, because of everything that's suddenly readily available to you. And thankfully, it had a positive outcome. But yeah, so the players went off for about 20 minutes or so. And like I say, Tottenham came on and they actually reacted really well. There was about 7 minutes, I think it was, of added time to still play for that first half. And they came out and they scored that fantastic third goal. And yeah, this is what I kind of feel right now. There's a bit of fight, there's a bit of character about this Tottenham team. They've come back and they're just... they're showing a little bit of togetherness again. And I'd hope, I don't know if this is the case, but I'd hope they're looking at what Nuno's kind of having to go through and the flack he's got. And they've kind of thought, those defeats, lots of that should have been on their shoulders as well. And yeah, they're ticking a lot more boxes now. There's still some iffy things that need to be worked on, of course, but this kind of strength of character, which I think they showed in the first 3 games, to be fair, in the Premier League, and now to have another 2 after as well, yeah, I think it's a good thing. I do think it's a good thing. So, I mean, kind of briefly going into... the other thing I want to say about Nuno as well, and it's only a minor thing, but he had a stinking cold. It's been going around. I know a few people have got it. It's, if you're not aware, obviously, kind of cold symptoms aren't really ones that you associate with COVID. But there's this other thing that's going around that people are getting this really horrible kind of head cold thing. I think my wife may have ended up getting that as well as COVID, which wasn't nice for her. But yeah, with Nuno, he had it. He had, I saw him in his press conference pre-match. He was really struggling. He kept kind of going underneath the table to blow his nose and all that, so he didn't have to do it on camera. And yeah, he was struggling big time. So yet another thing that I kind of feel he's kind of had to overcome. And I do feel that. I feel that the people that are kind of getting at him, I think you're probably only strengthening maybe his cause. But you know what I'm like. I've already said this before. I'm not the kind of person that wishes anyone loses their job. I don't like that. I don't like that aspect of football at all. It was even really unpleasant on Sunday, to be honest, when Spurs fans, which is just a thing that away fans do, you're being sacked in the morning thing to Steve Bruce, but the whole of St James's Park joined in, all the Newcastle fans. I don't like that. I know he's not the most popular man in the world, which is weird, isn't it? Because I think he's a Geordie, isn't he? As a Newcastle boy kind of thing. But they've just, it just hasn't really worked between them. I didn't like that. I didn't like the whole stadium singing that to him. I kind of put myself in his shoes. And I've seen him say comments before of like, he's glad his parents aren't alive anymore to see some of the things that are written and said about him. And I don't like that. I really don't like that at all. There's a lot of great things about football, and there's a lot of great things about fans and the way how passionate they are about football. But there's certain elements that just don't sit right with me, and that's probably one of them. But yeah, what else happened? Oh yeah, there was another weird incident where, talking about fans, Steve Hitchen and Fabio Paratici were sat slightly off to the side with some of the communications officers from Spurs, so off to the side of the dugout. But they also had Newcastle fans right next to them, which was weird in itself because they're all part of the red zone kind of COVID bubble for match days, because obviously they mix with the teams. So I thought that was a bit odd that they were there. So anyway, Steve Hitchen was properly having a go at the referee after. You might remember Emerson Royale had a really late challenge on him by someone and nothing was given. I think Newcastle had a little kind of chance on goal. And Hitchen was having a real kind of rant at the referee about it down there. And this Newcastle fan got so upset and angry. There was a real back and forth, proper handbag stuff. And this fan was getting so upset that it's like I presume it was his dad. He was obviously a bit older than him, and maybe the bloke was in probably late 30s, 40s, and his dad, who maybe was in his 60s, was kind of having to put his arms on his shoulders, like, calm down. And it was a really weird situation. One of the stewards actually had to come over and have a word with Steve Hitchen, which I don't know whether that's fair. Does a steward have to kind of intervene when a member of the club staff is kind of berating an official? I don't know. I don't really know where that kind of lies. And the rights and wrongs of all of that. But yeah, this fan was almost, it looked from my position, almost on the verge of tears. They were so angry about it. It was a very, very strange situation. But yeah, that aside. Players. Let's talk about players. Tanguy Ndombele, yay! I can flash my membership card for the Tanguy Ndombele fan club again. He was excellent, really, really, really excellent, which is good because I think he's owed Spurs that performance. I think he has. I think he's dipped a bit in recent kind of performances, and this was a really, really good one from him. He maybe was a little bit casual in the early stages, but what I would say is he dragged Spurs back into it. His goal was lovely. On initial viewing, I thought he kind of curled it inside the right-hand post, but actually, watching it back eventually on a replay, I didn't have a proper replay camera in a TV screen in front of me, so I had to kind of judge stuff in the moment. But afterwards, when I looked at it, I saw it. He'd hit the ball quite flat. It was almost like punched it with his foot, and it just kind of really. That's why I think Caldalo, the keeper, was kind of wrong-footed. It just went straight into net. It was a really lovely shot. He's on the he's got that strange kind of body shape as he does it, almost kind of slightly falling backwards as he hit it. And it was brilliant. It pulled Spurs back into the game. The move itself was really nice as well. It was a really good diagonal ball from Eric Dyer. And Sergio Reguilon's touch is beautiful. Not enough has maybe been made of the touch. Terrific touch. Knocks it inside to Reguilon, who had far too much space. Knocks it inside to Ndombele, who had far too much space. And then put it straight into the net. And then after that, I felt the confidence was just flowing through Ndombele. And he covered so much ground. I'm led to believe that he actually covered more ground than the other player on the pitch, which, when people kind of have a pop at Ndombele and they say about his, his stamina and all of that and the amount of kind of yards he puts on the pitch, to be the guy that ran the most, I think that was a big thing. He got the whole 90 minutes in his legs. That number 10 role suits him nicely. It's one you've probably heard me kind of call for him to play in before. It's probably not his most natural position. He is probably naturally a more deeper player, but I think it takes away some of the defensive duties off him. Although, to be fair to him, he was running back and tracking back a lot. He kept coming down the left and helping Reguilon out. I think, yes, it was definitely. John Joe Shelby's first yellow card was for a rubbish tackle on Ndombele when he was helping out Reguilon. And he did that a few other times on Ndombele as well. Some really nice moments down in the corner. He worked really, really hard. Worked his socks off. I think he's one of these players who the international break, obviously not being with France at the moment, does benefit him. I think they work a lot on his fitness. And he was good. He was really, really good. He's not going to give you... He kind of... on the day filled that Eriksen gap without being another Christian Eriksen, because he's nothing like Christian Eriksen. Very different players, but he did provide the quick tempo balls through, the through balls, the passing, but also kind of mixed in with the positive attacking running as well, and his movement was excellent in terms of getting into the box and around the box. It's weird, you kind of slightly lose that bit of Tongi magic where he does the Ndombele stuff in his own half, where he spins away from players and that strength. But what he does do is he goes at players. He gets out wide where it's on the left or the right, and he tries to get into the box, and he does really good things with the ball, and he creates things. He drags players out of position, takes one or two players out of the game, which makes space for others, and the Tottenham players really trust him. You look at the likes of Kane and Lucas and Son, and they all give him the ball a lot. Excuse me. They really are very confident that he'll do something with the ball, and that transmits to him that confidence as well. So this is massively promising. Look, I know there'll be people going, "It's Newcastle, they're rubbish," but honestly, Tongi made them look so ordinary. Their midfield were just chasing him. This was what I want to see from Tongi. It was Tongi running a game, and he did it from the number 10 position. Obviously, it's going to be really different against West Ham, and hopefully we see that again against West Ham. That's the key now, isn't it, for Tongi? It's consistency and showing it every week. Who else? Kane was much
better. Much better. I think he needed that first Premier League goal. Interestingly, the move for the Premier League goal itself, Højbjerg again, very underrated. His pass was terrific into Kane's run. Kane's movement was, as we know now, spot on. But I think he actually thought he was offside. I think you could tell that in the moment. The actual little flick he did over the keeper was so nonchalant. I think he just kind of expected the offside flag. And, and afterwards when he saw it, he kind of did this knowing smile. But obviously VAR showed that it was a terrific run. It was well onside. It wasn't even tight. It was a really, really good run. And I think just a bit like Tongi, I think it reminded Harry Kane, like, oh yeah, you can do this. And after that, he was terrific. A lot of his link-up play was superb. Won some free kicks and really important moments. He just looked far more confident with the ball and spraying it out wide. Those little first-time kind of curling passes he does out to the flank, to the fullbacks, Emerson mostly. And then obviously the ball for Son's goal, which was perfectly weighted. I think it was no look. I was trying to watch it back. There was one moment where he might have looked up, but I think he just knew that Son would be in that area. And that third goal, if you haven't seen it, and why I was kind of raving about it at the start, it just had so much to it. It had Højbjerg getting the ball, playing it into Lucas, who then fed Tongi. Tongi did a terrific turn, went back inside, fed it back to Lucas, who took this lovely touch around the player, ran past him, played it into Kane's path. Kane knocked it across, perfect weight. Sonny slides in at the back post. That's the kind of goal that we've really been waiting for. It was superb. Sonny and Lucas had interesting games, actually, kind of in different ways. I'd say Lucas had more of an impact in the build-up to stuff, but maybe suffered from that same Lucas issue, which unfortunately has sometimes of just not having that decision-making right in the final third. There were a couple of times he got into the box, and there was one in particular where he skied his cross into the stratosphere. It was very odd. Whereas I'd say Son maybe wasn't as good in his build-up play, but you just know with Son he's got that quality in the final third, and we saw that with a terrific sliding finish, and he actually a corner as well that Lucas headed against the crossbar. So yeah, they kind of both contributed in different ways on the day, differing performances. But that you feel like that's the attacking four now, and it's up to the other players kind of trying to wrestle those shirts off them. I feel that you've got the Lucas and Son who are happy going out wide, but also happy coming inside and letting Reguilon and Emerson bomb down and have the width from fullbacks. And you've got Kane obviously up there, and Tongi just knitted it all together really nicely. And I think at the moment, that's the strongest four. And I think what's also key to them, and Nuno was very, very, very insistent on pointing this out, and he was spot on. Was the foundation behind them of Skippy and Højbjerg. I'm not going to go on about Skip again because you very much know my feelings about young Oliver Skip, but he was superb again. He just is so calm in what he does, and his interceptions, the big tackles he does right at the moments when you really need him to, and he uses the ball really well. He uses it in a progressive manner. I still had someone tweeted me today, oh, Alistair loves that kid Skip. That kid Skip, like he's some kind of, some youngster that he's just heard of. I think we hear about a lot of these more attacking players that are really getting raved about in the Premier League right now, and I think Skip is massively getting overlooked. And it won't be until someone on like Match of the Day, someone like, I don't know, Alan Shearer or Gary Neville does a bit on like Monday Night Football about him or something, and they really analyse and show exactly what he does. I think a lot of maybe the fans who maybe aren't at games, I don't know, or maybe just perhaps don't notice the things that defensive-minded midfielders do, will look at it and go, oh yeah, he's really good, isn't he? And then it will become maybe more fashionable to like him. But, I will keep banging on about him, especially when he has performances like that, because he was superb. And he unlocks, like I've said before, Højbjerg. Højbjerg then becomes more of the Højbjerg from the European Championships with Denmark. Let's not forget Højbjerg started off as an attacking midfielder, and the pass to Kane was fantastic as well. And he had a few moments where he bursts up the pitch and he gets past people and he looks to get the ball progressively into attacks, and having Skip alongside him allows him to do that. It's a really good burgeoning partnership, that. And I think a lot of the good things about Højbjerg as well will rub off on Skip. He's a terrific mentor, to have alongside you. And I think what the two of those are doing just creates this platform for the attacking forward to then go on and know that they've got this cover behind them. And also the fullbacks. There's plenty of times that Reguilon and Emerson would bomb on, and you'd see Højbjerg and Skip come back out to the wide, like to the flanks, and do their job for them. Essentially, it's some people might say, oh yeah, having two defensively minded midfielders, oh no, you can't have that. It's too much, but it's kind of not, because like I say, you get this different version of Højbjerg when Skip plays alongside him, and it allows him to be kind of a more of a box to box player, and it benefits the team. Still have to go back to it. Skip not starting against Chelsea and Arsenal, I think it's being made to look more and more like Nuno's biggest mistake. And I think he knows it. I think he does. So they were good. Looking at defence, it was a strange one. Another weird one for the defence, with some kind of really mixed performances. Let's talk about the positive. Sergio Reguilon was excellent. That was probably, for me, one of his best performances in a long, long time. Defensively, did really well with pretty much everything that came his way. Attacking wise, they gave him a lot of space, but he made the most of it, and that's the thing for me with Reguilon. He's got pace, he's got a terrific first touch. It's just, for me, with him, it's about making the most of when he gets the ball in those areas. But obviously set up on Ndombele's goal with his touch and control and the pass. He maybe could have gone on to score with he burst into towards the edge of the box, which is when John Joe Shelby cynically hacked him down for his second yellow and the red towards the end. But no, really, really good for Reguilon. His best defender on the day for me. Emerson started really shakily. In their first goal, it was his kind of this weird stabbing attempt at a clearance that just helped nobody and just kind of presented them the ball in a really rubbish position. But he got better as the game wore on. Still needs to be more quality in what he does in the attack in the opposition half. But yeah, it was. He is raw. He's very raw. 22 years old. I can see a lot of good things. His fitness is terrific. Bearing in mind, he and Romero both had only played in the early hours of Friday morning UK time for their countries, and then to play a full 90 minutes again. I think that side definitely is a massive plus for him. He's got a great engine. It's just about moulding this kind of very raw player into what he can become. Centre backs, it's a weird day. Romero had some really iffy moments. He, again, we'll give him that he could have been tired mentally from playing that game only just over 48 hours or so beforehand. But he's got to cut out this habit of, he can look really composed 1 minute and then the next can be very rash in what he does. And he'll lunge in. And he did about 3 or 4 of those at Newcastle. And each time it leaves him out of position. And he was, for their goal at the start, he was very much wasn't switched on to Wilson's run. Callum Wilson deserves a lot of credit. It was a terrific run. It was a really good header. But still, you could just see that Romero had no idea that he was there. And he got in far too easily. And there were a few moments where, actually there was one moment where Eric Dyer was shouting at Romero saying, "Stay there." And he was really doing a really big kind of hand motion saying, "Stay there." Because essentially he was saying, "I've got this, but if I don't, for some reason, or the ball gets through, there's a big gap now behind us." And that's something that Romero just does too much. And it's something I'm sure he's probably overcompensating. He's probably, he's very, very good at Atalanta. Obviously, Serie A Defender of the Year. Different kind of league, different kind of attacks he was facing there. And I think he's now maybe trying to overcompensating for what he sees happening around him with other defenders, maybe. But the problem is because of the pace of the game here, that ball can very quickly be delivered into the area, the big gap that he's left behind him. And there were a few times that happened. And yeah, Dyer was really kind of shouting at him and he ignored him. He still came across. And the Spurs were fortunate that the ball did get into that area, but it was kind of squandered by Newcastle. He got better, though. He got better as the game went on, Romero. A bit like Emerson. They definitely kind of, a shaky start, they became a bit better. Whereas Eric Dyer went the other way. Eric Dyer had actually had a pretty solid game on the whole. In my player ratings, I think I was probably going to give him a 7 or so. He was heading towards that. He just had one of those really frustrating Eric Dyer moments where all the good decision making is kind of undone in one moment. And what he did was he gave away a silly free kick, which was completely unnecessary. And then, under no real pressure whatsoever, he ended up kind of throwing himself at the ball from the subsequent free kick. And I think it bounced in off his knee in the end. And it was just so silly and needless. And I mean, he was fortunate that, against other teams, even with 10 men, that could have given them a massive leg up. But Spurs, fortunately for him, really managed the game well after that. They just kept the ball away from Newcastle. It was very good. But for Dyer, it was just like, you're doing that again. And it's those little moments where he's kind of almost like the brain switches off, which is so ironic because he is probably one of the most intelligent players at the club. He's a very intelligent guy, very articulate, very, very clever. But just for some reason in each game, he just has those moments where he switches off. And I think that's what prevents him really from being the player that I think he believes he can be. I did a Q&A with Guesty this week, and a couple of people asked a similar question of like, why is Eric Dyer always picked by every manager? Because I think every manager sees in him that he is one of the more experienced players. He's a clever guy. Tactically, he's very clever. And, certainly with right now, the crop of centre-backs you've got, he's the oldest centre-back, isn't he? And so you kind of need that experience and his ability to play on the left of the centre-back pairing as well. But, so there's a reason that likes of Poch, that Mourinho, that Mason, that Nuno, all are picking him, whereas the fans are like, oh. It's because he does have a lot of these qualities, but unfortunately it's just those moments where he switches off, where he lets himself down. He's one of these players that I just wonder whether maybe as he gets older and wiser, and maybe when he's in his late 20s, early 30s, he has this really kind of high point in his career where he really learns from his mistakes and he becomes a much more consistent player, because I do think there's a good centre-back in there. But he just lets himself down, and it's very odd. It really is a very, very odd one. Other thing I was going to say about it is no substitutions at all, which was strange, bearing in mind like I say about Emerson and Romero, both having played just over, 56, 60 hours before or something. But I asked Nuno afterwards about it, and he just said, look, it was a clear we were in control of the game. You didn't feel energy-wise they were really exerting themselves, Spurs anyway. And he kind of referred back to his point of how he's using matches to just essentially get the team to gel and get their match sharpness up. He said he felt that after the international break and not being together, that it was more important for them to have a full 90 minutes together. Which kind of indicates, I think, like I say, that we're seeing his preferred starting 11 right now, and he wants them to get as much time together as possible. And I kind of get it from that aspect, and also the fact that, midweek at Vitesse, they can probably swap up all 11 players if they want. So, yeah, I got it. A lot of people afterwards maybe a bit going overboard, and I don't know, maybe we all try to sometimes look for a negative and a positive, and I'm talking about the COVID tests here. But yeah, I did kind of understand what he meant. Personally, I'm sure, a lot of us probably would have brought on made some changes, but yeah, no, I got it. I got the idea of giving them more time to gel, because I've said this before in videos, the amount of training time with the entire squad he's had since he arrived at Tottenham has been negligible. It's been so small. You're probably talking about 3 to 4 weeks with the entire squad out of, when did he arrive? In July? It's ridiculous. And it's because of all of these international breaks. It's because of injuries, because of absences, because of isolations and everything. So yeah, it's kind of, it makes me wonder what he's going to do this week, because, like I say, I personally would probably change the entire starting 11 for Vitesse. I think you can maybe get away with it in this game. It's not going to be easy, I'm not saying that, but I do feel like this is a game where you can, what I would do, it's a little bit risky. It's exactly what he did with Pesos de Ferreira, the away leg. He left the entire starting 11 that he wanted to play against Wolves, it was that weekend. He left them back in England to train with Ian Cathro, who kind of put them through their paces and just got them all ready for that Wolves game, which they went away and obviously and won. And I'm sure Mrs. Cathro, if she's I don't know if she's a wife or not, or a girlfriend, I'm sure she'd be very happy if he is not having a long paternity leave to have him back in the UK as well for this coming week. I mean, yes, it leaves your bench very weak. Of course it does. I mean, starting 11, you would go with Galini, Doherty or Tanganga, Rodon, Sanchez, and Davies. I'm not entirely sure. I presume Sanchez is allowed to travel, despite having come back from what I presume would be a red list country for the Netherlands as well. I'm not sure how that works, what their exemptions are for sportsmen. And then you have Winks and Lo Celso in the middle. Then you've got Hill, Ali, Bergwijn playing behind probably Dane Scarlett. So you could change up your entire 11, I think. Obviously, that then leaves you with, I don't know if Nuno would go as far to do what he did against Pesos and have a bench that essentially is young players, really, plus either Tanganga or Doherty. But I think he could probably get away with it. I think if Spurs were to draw or lose this game, it's probably not the be-all and end-all. Whereas I think, Sunday against West Ham, another derby where they've got to get back on track in derbies, and we know it's going to be a incredibly tough match against a West Ham team that are so much better under David Moyes nowadays. I think that's the more important game, and I'd get the players to be resting up slightly, but mostly preparing for this match. I think that would be more important for me. So yeah, but we'll see what happens with that as well. And hopefully, Steven Bergwijn back and he's back in training. There's a good chance for him to get some minutes on Thursday. I think the one player we're waiting for now is Ryan Sessegnon. I haven't had an update on him recently. I might ask Nuno about him tomorrow in this press conference, just to see where he's at with his recovery. He's been so unfortunate. Really has, Ryan Sessegnon. Sometimes players have that, don't they? They just have nightmares with injuries. They really do. Other news this week. Spurs Executive Board have finally agreed to meet the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust, which I don't know why they didn't do it to begin with. Very strange one. Whatever's happened before, you could say that they might be thinking, well, why are we meeting up with a trust who wanted us all to resign and all this sort of stuff. I get that, but even with that history, they kind of had already started to patch that up, and just to say no initially to a meeting during a time at that point when Spurs were struggling, I don't see what the logic of that is. There's no negative, I don't think, that can come from the board just sitting down and explaining what their strategy is short term and long term for the club. There's nothing bad in that. A little bit of transparency is no bad thing at all. So I think they're having a chat on Thursday now. They've done a bit of a U-turn. How many times has the Spurs board and hierarchy done a U-turn in the last couple of years? But there you go. So they're having a little chat on Thursday, which I think it will then lead to a proper board-to-board meeting. So that's good. And they gave this little kind of message, which was allowed to be shared out to the general public and the trust members and everyone really, which had some little interesting points in it. It admitted that the club is back on a financially stable footing, which we kind of I've spoken about this in previous videos. The refinancing and everything of the loans and the long-term debt helped a lot of that, and the pandemic issues were kind of were spread out, which is so much better as well, obviously. And also in that message, they said that we're in the midst of rebuilding on and off the pitch. So for me personally, I'm taking that as a little bit of a promise in there. We look back to Daniel Levy saying about the what kind of manager he wanted, which was very much taken as a promise. And I think there's a little bit in this board statement as well, which would have had to be improved by Daniel Levy as well, of the club saying, look, financially we're back to where we want to be and we're rebuilding. So I don't think there's any real excuses now for skimping on not getting the right players at the right times. I think that for me, I think you've said that in that message now. You haven't said times are still tough and we're still keeping, watching our pennies very closely. You've said, we're on a financially stable footing again. So yeah, this is a rebuild has to be done right. This was the biggest thing I think about the Poch era, because we look at Newcastle now coming in with their super power money, whatever you want to call it, adding to the very rich teams that were already in the Premier League. But Spurs never used to panic anyway. When in the Poch era, they didn't panic. They tried to buy the right players at the right times, which is why we had you had the top three finishes in 3 consecutive years. Then you had the top 4 finish with the Champions League final. Spurs punched above their weight because they did things in an efficient manner. Obviously, that all started to go wrong when they didn't do that. When they had those 3 transfer windows, it was 2 or 3, where they didn't sign any players. That was when they stopped being efficient and started to look more towards not doing the right things and saving money. And that was when I think it all started to fall apart. And I think they need to get back to where they were before that, which was making the right signings. They don't have to be absolutely bank-busting signings. They just have to be properly scouted and the right people for the right positions at the right time. Because, Spurs really, for a good 4-year period, were essentially proving what Daniel Levy said was true, was that it's not about how much money you throw at it, it's about doing it in the right way. But you do have to put some money towards it. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of impact now Fabio Paratici has on that, and how he, whether his scouting is right, and it's going to be a big kind of thing on his shoulders right now, because Leicester have proved it as well. Leicester are another good example. It's not about throwing your money at something in terms of the ridiculous fees that we see some clubs paying. It's not like that at all. You can do it with squad harmony and all that as well, and getting, like I say, the right players at the right time is just as important. So, I don't think Tottenham need to panic about the Newcastle being another kind of big player in the years to come. It just, for me, should be a spur for them to make sure they get back to what they were doing and was doing it in the right way. Yes, I know it frustrated people, and I know for every Alderweireld that joins and fills a gap perfectly, you'd end up with an Nkudu and an NG and other players that haven't really hit the mark and have been more risks than anything. And this is, like I say, this is where Paratici comes in to lessen the element of risk, making sure more it's the right player. But Daniel Levy has to back him in that as well financially. So, that'd be interesting. That'd be really interesting. I'm interested to see what comes out in the meeting with the trust and how much more detail he goes into. Financial results will be coming out. I'm trying to think when the next one's out, but they certainly alluded to them in their message to the fans and to the trust. So I'd be intrigued to see kind of how that's all laid out and whether they kind of go back slightly and step it back and say, but we're still tight on money and all that. So yes, it was difficult. Of course it was, but now it's now things seem to be moving in the right direction. They've got all the events back. They've got the NFL back. The boxing's been there, and they keep making it very clear that all the money from those events goes straight back into the football side of things. So we shall see. We shall see. Right, that's probably everything I've got to talk about today. Like I say, I shall try and hopefully do a bit of a Q&A with those excellent questions that came in. There's some really good stuff, not only about football, about kind of my job and stuff like that, which I will get around to and I will answer them. Apologies slightly for the lighting. I've noticed it's really, really bright for some reason. Even though I'm doing this with it's dark outside, perhaps that's what it is. The whole light-dark balance is a bit weird. So apologies if I'm very, very bright on your screen, which may be quite unsettling. But hopefully it hasn't ruined this too much. But glad to be back. Feeling much, much better, which is terrific. And now I get to have that, hopefully, that immunity, that natural immunity for 6 months or so. And anyone else that's had it, it is pretty rubbish if you're not asymptomatic. But all better now. And thank you to everyone that's wished me well on social media. That's very kind of you. And now back into the routine. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Press conference tomorrow with Nuno and a player. I don't know who the player is yet. It will obviously be someone that plays in these European games. Hopefully give us someone, maybe like a Dele Alli. It'd be interesting to see where his head's at right now. Or Steven Bergwijn coming back as well. Be interesting to see kind of what he's out. Probably won't be Harry Winks because I think we had him not too long ago. Giovanni Lo Celso would be interesting. We don't hardly ever get him to speak to, so he'd be very interesting, especially kind of after everything that's happened with him in the last month or so. But there you go. Yeah, I shall report on all of that. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.